Hey, well, thank you for joining us today. My name's Dave Krishock. I'm the Baker's National Education Foundation professor at Kansas State University, which is located in very flat Manhattan, Kansas. We're about 2 hours west of Kansas City. And we have a bakery science program, a 4-year program that I'll talk about a little bit during the presentation today. I am not a social scientist, I'm just a baker. And so I'm going to put some information together for you and some real life experiences of things that happen with many of my students on a day-to-day basis. So the title is, Where'd All the Bakers Go? Where have they all gone? And a couple of things we want to look at, because at the beginning of each class I always have some class objectives. Can you all hear okay? Everybody okay? Yeah, and Scott, I look good, don't I? Oh, cool. All right. But we want to see what's the problem. We want to talk about the staff of life, but most people talk about the staff of life and they think it's the loaf of bread. Well, in this case, I want to talk about the real staff, which is the people who are going to make the bread or the donuts or the cakes or whatever. Then what are the challenging ingredients in this current problem? Who's going to make the bread, the donuts, the pastries, those things? And then finally, could we make some formulation changes? And I'm kind of playing off a little bit facetiously off baker's percent and formulas and things like that. So kind of bear with me. And I will also tell you, if you have a question at any time, it's okay if they ask, isn't it? Yeah? So if you got a burning question, go ahead and ask, all right? And no, this is not my grandfather in the front row, I swear to God, okay? All right, so here's some bakers back in 1964 in the lab in Kansas State University. Our baking program started there, actually officially in '65. It was originally in Florida State University in their School of Business. And the business people there said, yeah, we don't want to mess with food. We just want to talk about business, you know, bean counting, things like that. And so it moved over to Kansas. And the first year was in '65. The first degree was offered in '68. We are the only place in the country that you can get a 4-year bachelor's degree, either in bakery science, milling science, or feed science. Feed science, not like how do you eat, but feed science, how do we make dog food, cattle food, fish food, those things. And somebody might say, well, gee whiz, why do you need bakers? Hang on, come on in, gang. Come on. We're all friends here. It's the baking business. Talking about the baking business, why do we need all these people? Well, look at this. The baking industry accounts for about $1.2 billion with an economic impact. That is tremendous. Right? Now, granted, a lot of that currently, a large majority of that may be bake-off, frozen dough, refrigerated dough products, but it still accounts for a tremendous amount of economic impact. It is the number one retail driver at the grocery store. Right? And what's interesting is it's a continually growing category. Here's the interesting thing about it, is that if we're in the baking industry, we almost have 100% job security, because unless you're different than me, you like to eat. And so do all those other 319 million consumers, right? Now, they obviously have choices, and maybe they don't like your product as much as the other guys, but they do have those choices, and they do want to eat. And then finally, it's interesting that over 90% of the households go to the grocery store at some time, okay, on a weekly, on a monthly basis to buy baked goods, right? And I put that up there just strictly because, you know, it used to be nice. Every town had a small little retail bakery. Well, that doesn't happen much anymore. Chicago may be a little bit different, but the number of retail standalone bakeries is very limited. Why? Nobody wants to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And thus, we have a lot of frozen and refrigerated dough products. But the bread market, bread and baked goods trend, you can see here, it's slowly increasing, not dramatically. And although Dr. Oz says you really should not be eating bread because that gluten is going to kill you, all right? Bread sales are increasing. Slowly, is not going to go away. Now, the style of bread may vary, whether it's a flat bread, whether it's an artisan bread, whether it's a tortilla, whatever, but it's not going anywhere. So I got to tell you a little bit about myself, just so you don't think I'm some wacko that they brought in here to talk to you, right? My grandparents owned a bakery near Milwaukee, and so I have 6 brothers and sisters. We were cheap labor, yeah. My first memories were, I was the short guy, so I got to scrape the floor, the wooden floors in the retail shop every night. And then I got elevated, well, I got taller, so I got to be pan greaser, pan washer, finally made it up to scaling, but about that time, my grandfather passed away of a heart attack, and my grandma was a great baker, but she was a terrible businesswoman. And so about 2 years later, the bank decided they could probably run the bakery better than my grandma. I have a Bachelor of Science from Clemson. That's down in South Carolina. Here's the joke. My undergraduate degree is in forestry. Okay, so I tell people I'm still in the fiber business. Okay, one fiber you build a house with, the other fiber we put in your bread, and even more so on the fiber now because we're trying to put more fiber in there. I graduated from the American Institute of Baking in a 20-week resident course there, and then I went to work for King Arthur Flour. And if you're from the Northeast at all, you might be familiar with King Arthur Flour, but I tell people jokingly, and I still have a lot of friends that work there, but it's almost like a baking cult. It really is. Because even people in Kansas will pay an exceptional amount of price for a 5-pound bag of good King Arthur flour because their grandmother did, all right? From there, I was the production manager over at Zingerman's Bakehouse, which is a large artisan-style bakery in Ann Arbor. Managed 85 employees 24/7, and we made everything from scratch. I just want to tell you a little bit about Zingerman's fantastic product, tremendous mail order product, but I will tell you that if you want to buy one of their artisan loaves of bread, let's call it a chili cheese bread, or we could call it a chocolate cherry bread, £1.50, you're going to pay $12 to $15 for that. Okay? And you know what? They can't make enough of them, all their products. And that is one reason why we have the demise of the retail bakery. They were selling their product too cheap. And then in 2005, I went to K-State, and I've been there about 10 years. We currently have about 75 young people in our baking program. We graduate approximately 25 a year. And the really nice thing about it is we have 100% placement. We cannot fill the pipeline, even begin to fill the pipeline on the number of bakers needed in our industry. Now, I have to clarify that just a little bit. When potential high school students or community college students come to us, myself and my 2 colleagues on the faculty always ask them 2 questions. One is, do you watch the Food Network? And if they say, yeah, I said, well, that's not what we do. That really is not what we want to do. If that's what you're interested in, then we would highly recommend maybe you consider culinary school. Okay? You'll get a lot more hands-on time. You work on a larger variety of products, right? But our program delves into the science and technology a little bit. They do have hands-on time. They have several baking labs, but they're going to take biochemistry. They're going to take microbiology. Okay? They're going to take physics, a lot of management and business classes. So a little bit more involved because the vast majority of them will probably go to work for a larger corporation. Could be Sara Lee, could be Pepperidge Farm, could be Nestle. Not all of them. About every year I have 2 or 3 that have that desire to go to work at the bench at 4 o'clock in the morning and be in a retail environment. And that's perfectly fine. You know, we're thrilled that we're able to offer an opportunity to a lot of different students. So I got to put this up there only because my wife says I shouldn't. This doesn't play, but some of you may know more about K-State than I wish you knew about K-State. There's a YouTube video that was up about 2 weeks ago. This is the K-State marching band. On the left-hand side is supposed to be a Jayhawk from the University of Kansas. That's our arch rival, okay? Yeah, arch rival. So I don't know why they picked a game where we're playing South Dakota State, but anyhow, they put the KU Jayhawk up there. On the right-hand side, I know it looks funny, and a lot of people on YouTube and the World Wide Web thought it looked funny, but that really is the Starship Enterprise, okay? Not anything else, I swear. But what's interesting, and the reason I put this up here is because 5 or 10 years ago, the speed with which this hit the internet would never have happened. And that's why today, millennials, many of you in the room today, within 5 minutes, it's old news. Right? So here's a couple of our bakers. This was a product development class, and this was team brand. All right, so they take a 6-hour lab. This one happened to be, okay, can you make a brand product, and I forget what the percentage in the formula was required, but can you make a brand product? Can you make it shelf stable? All right, make it shelf stable with a 2-week shelf life. Second option was, can you make it freezer proof so that it could be frozen and then thawed and served? And so this is just one of the, I just want to show you, this is what we start with when they come to K-State. And these would be generally 3rd or 4th year students. And then they go off to work at, I've got 2 graduates in there that work for Nestle. They were in California, I'm not sure where they are now. I have a couple more that the young lady on the left is with Flowers Foods. In case you don't know Flowers Foods, they're probably the largest held US baking company. Pretty close, depending on who buys who on which day. But they're based out of Thomasville. And so the young lady on the left, Amber, she started with us over about 11 years ago. She's moved around about 3 or 4 times because that's what you're probably going to do in the food industry if you're working for a larger company. But now she is the assistant production or facility manager for a brand new bakery in Lenexa, Kansas. Well, I shouldn't say it's really brand new. They used to make a lot of Hostess breads there, but no longer. Now Flowers owns it. Gentleman on the right is a 3rd year student. His name is Ian. He's done 2 internships, so he had an opportunity to do a summer-long internship with Flowers down in Denton, in a large production facility, bread and bun. And then the young lady on the right graduated about 3 or 4 years ago. She's with Kane Ingredients. They are an ingredient supplier out of Dallas. So she travels quite a bit for them. And the reason she's on the picture there is she does a lot of work where companies like Flowers or other baking companies, food companies, they need to develop a new product. Well, not everybody is as big as Nestle or Pepperidge Farm. Maybe they cannot afford to have a lot of lab time. So they may go to one of their ingredient suppliers and say, hey, you have space, we want to take in the next great Pop-Tart or the next great swirl bread or whatever. Can you help us with that? And that's one of the things that Chrissy does. So when ABA, and that's the American Baking Association, that's the largest lobbying group for the baking industry, surveyed their members here for 2015. They said, hey, what are some of the top challenges facing this baking industry? And you can see government regulations. Well, that will never go away. Okay, it's always going to be there. But we also have workforce issues. Okay, where are we going to find people to fill this pipeline? So then that's where the millennials come up. And this is not a millennial bashing presentation because many of you probably have already sat in on those. All right? And I have too. But here's another good example of some people up at Pepperidge Farm. Young lady on the left started with an internship with Pepperidge Farm. Now she works for Nestle up in their pizza division. The second lady in there is an interesting story. She came from a community college in Alabama, came to us, did an internship with Pepperidge Farm, 6-month internship, and they offered her a full-time job. In fact, we started the internship program with Pepperidge Farm about 5 years ago. I have had 9 interns up there. All 9 were offered full-time jobs before they even left the building. Now, some of them had another semester or 2 to go. And of the 9, 4 took up or accepted the offer. The other 5 took other baking jobs. But on this internship, whether it's with Pepperidge Farm, Sara Lee, Tyson Foods, whoever, what's interesting about it is this is the way that the industry needs to get young people, millennials, excited about our business. Okay? It's a sales job. We're in sales every day. Each of you in this room are in sales. Well, we have to be in sales too, and so does the food industry. Because you know what? Working in a bread and bun plant or working in a Hostess plant or a Little Debbie plant Not very sexy, is it? No, it's not. But there is great opportunity for advancement, because you know why? Because people like Ken here and myself, eventually we would like to retire. Probably would have retired a couple years ago if the economy had allowed us to. Now it's slowly picking back up, but there is great opportunity. The lady on the third from the left there, she's been with Pepperidge Farm about 4 years, and she came from a little dinky town in western Kansas. And I had to beg her to go take an internship with them. She did, and you know what? She loves driving in Connecticut, because that's where they're based, right? And she'll never leave. But again, she had to go out and experience it. Lady, the middle right there, she was with Pepperidge Farm for about 2 years, and then the Kind bars, they stole her away because she enjoyed Manhattan so much, she moved to Manhattan. Oh wait, we're based in Manhattan, Kansas. She wanted to move to the real Big Apple, so she gets to work in Hell's Kitchen now and loves that experience. Guy on the right, he's about a 73 graduate of our program. And so we have two different generations right here. We have a baby boomer on the right, and everybody else is Generation Y or a millennial. And you guys can help me with this, but I just put up a couple of things here. If you look at the baby boomers, and look at the ages we're talking about, 50 to 67, okay? And then if you come all the way down here, what's interesting, look at the music choices. All right, so if we compare the baby boomers, those people 50 to 67, okay? They're fans of the Beatles and Elvis and the Stones and the Grateful Dead, okay? And then as we move over to Generation X, okay, they're a little bit older. These are probably people that are in maybe senior management now. Maybe they've moved with 2 or 3 different companies, okay? A little bit different. And what's interesting about the Generation X group here is their big tool of choice was this computer called a TI-30. Okay, it came out in the, I don't know, 76, something like that. Baby, that thing sold for about $300 or $400. It was heavier than the dickens, and you know what it could do? The same thing that your $3 calculator can do now. It can add, subtract, divide, multiply. That was all it could do. But now, with the millennial, and we might call them millennials, some people call them Generation Y, some people even refer to you guys as echo boomers. But anyhow, anything with an I in it is going to fly, okay? A mechanical analog computer for the baby boomers. Anybody know what that is? Anybody ever seen a mechanical analog computer? What is it? It's a slide rule. And I'll bet you'd have to almost go to a museum to see one of these things now, okay? But for that age group, that was their calculator. And if you had somebody who was good on a slide rule, in many cases, they were faster than those first computers or those first calculators that came out. Now, just so that we stay in touch what's happening, there's actually 2 other generations. We got the oldest, those are the matures. Okay? And what's interesting about the matures is 29 million of them in the workforce. Many of them probably aren't working any longer, the reason they're up there is they have unbelievable buying power. So you have to look at them as a potential consumer that can have a tremendous impact on the product that you make. And then the next generation, we can't just stay with Generation Y. We got to go to Generation Z now, okay? So anybody from 2000 on, and those dates are just a little bit movable depending on which millennial expert you're talking to, all right? But Generation Z there, okay, the newest iPhone, hopefully they'll be motoring around with a driverless car or a car that's self-driving while they're working on their iPhone. What kind of music do you listen to? Sorry, I don't have a clue, but some of you in the room could probably ask a high school student or a culinary school student what the music of choice would be. But here's the interesting thing. Look at that number, 41 million. In 5 years, they will account for over 20% of the workforce. Okay, so if you take Generation Z, add that to the Generation Y, which is going to account for 36% of the workforce, over 50% of the workforce, people that we need to make the donuts, the cookies, the cakes, the frozen product, whatever, over 50% of those are going to come from those two generations. We better figure out how to work with them. So the challenge is, and most of you know this, but they are hooked up, networked in electronically to anything you can imagine, and even many that I don't even know. Right? But what aggravates some of the baby boomers and some of the Generation X people, okay, the older people, okay, is that oftentimes this networking is with individuals or groups outside of work. Okay? Maybe you have a question you got to ask the internet or Siri or whatever, or maybe you want to stay in contact with a group that you deal with after work. Well, you know what? Oftentimes the older generations see that as you're just like putting off work. Okay? That you're just not all that dedicated. Right? When in fact, you're just trying to stay more connected. So, the American Baking Association goes back and says, okay, now specifically, what issues are impacting all of the members of ABA? So these could be large commercial bakeries, food establishments, chicken companies like Tyson, okay? Right, well, Tyson makes a lot of baked products. They bought a lot of these Sara Lee labels, right? But if you look at that, one of the major ones there again, labor workforce issues. Where are we going to find these people? Now here's the interesting thing. If we ask, and you guys could probably fess up to this, the younger people, I'm not talking to you, Ken. You're still awake, that's a good thing.
Sure is.
But here's the interesting thing, and I tell you this not just from what the experience or the information I got from the internet, but my 10 years of sitting in a classroom, lecture room, or my own office and talking to a lot of millennials. And we look at it and say, okay, how do the millennials rate themselves? Well, we're pretty people savvy, but the HR people said, no, you're not very savvy because you're always stuck on the phone, okay, texting or whatever. Now you're very tech savvy, and look at that, the millennials even rate themselves pretty low, all right? Where the HR people said, hey, they are very tech savvy. Why is that? Because a lot of HR people or baby boomers or Generation X people, they don't know how to do that thing on their phone or on their computer. So who are they going to ask? A millennial, right? Are they loyal to their employers? That's the interesting one. Look at that. HR people say, no way. They are not loyal. Are they fun-loving? Yeah. Well, I don't know where fun ever became a problem. Excessive fun at work probably is not a good thing, but a little bit of fun makes it more enjoyable. And then look at hard-working. The millennials think they're working their tails off, okay? And they may be, okay? But they work differently than the baby boomers or Generation X folks. I pulled this up because I think this is the perception that many of the baby boomers and Generation X people have of the millennials. Yeah, I think that's the wrong one for two reasons. One, I don't think that's true, and two, even if it was, if they're making up over 50% of the workforce in 5 years, we better figure out how to work with them and make it work. So, are millennials that age group? Okay, is it an asset or a liability? Oops, you didn't like the way that came in, but anyway, sorry about that. Myth: millennials don't want your advice. Heck yeah, they battle negative perceptions all that time. The fact that you're not totally dedicated to work. Right? They're all about money. Well, survey after survey says that's not the case at all. Actually, many millennial-aged workers or soon-to-be entry-level workers are more interested in what else does the company do? What things does the company offer? How are they involved in their community with the families that work for that company? How do they fit into their world? Also, not willing to put in hours to get ahead. Well, that's because research shows that they actually value experiences more than over just possession of things. Good example, in the Kansas City paper about 2 weeks ago, they had a big full-page article on there that said millennials don't want their parents' crap. Those Beanie Baby collections, those big stuffed couches, whatever your parents or your grandparents have, you don't want it. Why? You want something that's a little bit faster, a little bit more compact. You're not into collecting things. And then millennials have unrealistic expectations for the job. I can't tell you the number of times that companies come in to interview our students or give presentations that they tell me time and time again that they think that a lot of the millennials want to be the president of the company in 3 years. I said, well, yeah, I have a lot of students that would like to get through my class as fast as possible without doing the work, all right? But in this case, I think mostly what we see from the millennials is they just want to know what are the expectations, okay? By when do you want it? And what are the rewards or what are the consequences? In our day, and I should tell you I'm 56, and in our day, many people went to work and you just did the job. And hopefully sometime in the next 6 months, next 12 months, next year, you might get a promotion. Would you ever ask for one? Oh, heck no, probably not. So what's the formulation change to make this work? Well, we could put on a ballet. Okay, the Joffrey Ballet actually is putting on a show right about now based on millennials. That's probably not going to be a solution to our problem. I don't think so. Okay? So there might be a couple other things that we could possibly do. How are we going to recruit them? How are we going to grow them professionally? And how are we going to retain these millennials? Right? Well, one way is employee engagement, face-to-face consultations, mentoring, coaching, right? Think about those of you who went to your first job, whether it was at the local grocery store or maybe it was at a retail operation, maybe it was even some retail shopping store. Right? And oftentimes you'd get thrown in there with little or no training. Absolutely little or no training at all. Right? And then you'd sit there. And oftentimes our interns who will go out for the summer may go out to do a summer internship, and for the first 2 or 3 days, do you know what they normally get? Hour after hour after hour of safety videos. Safety videos and other things. Nobody really wants to talk with them because they don't really know what to do with them. Right? That's not going to fly if you want this employee to stay with you, and also if you'd like other potential employees to follow. Got to be a lot of coaching. This is a great one. I claim it. It's my idea. It says, tout your benefits. Can't tell you the number of young people who have no idea or very little idea of financial benefits other than the paycheck. Okay? Oftentimes they'll get, I should tell you that we survey our graduating seniors. Ask them all kinds of things. Who'd you like? Who didn't you like? Which classes are terrible? How could we improve the program? What new equipment do you need? Do you have a job? Would you mind telling me what the starting salary is? And about 80 to 85% of them actually will tell our department head what the starting salary is. Last year, the starting salary was right about $58,000. Okay, $58,000 right out of the chute. Pretty good. Oh, wait, I should tell you on top of that, most of them will get a pretty significant signing bonus and travel relocation, or travel expenses, relocation expenses. So it's a pretty good starting salary. Could you live off that with a family of 4? And it might be a little tough. But when you consider that the average college student now is coming out somewhere right around $36,000 to $40,000, that's a pretty nice starting salary. So what my idea is, now we got to help these young people, whether they're a college student or whether they're a potential employee. We got to tell them look at the other benefits that the job offers. Healthcare, okay? Is the company paying for all of it? Are you going to pay for 20% of it? How does that work? How can we educate these young millennials into the benefits that they have accrued? When I started to work, everybody got 2 weeks off. You didn't get any time off until you earned so many days. Well, it's a lot different than that now. There's all kinds of plans. But the student, now turned first-time employee, has to be educated on that. Again, it goes back to selling your company to these young people who really like that tech stuff and could go off and maybe do something snazzier, okay? Job security, maybe not as good. So what do the millennials require? Now, you can all say, that's not true at all. Or maybe this does sound a little bit, but this lady from Enterprise Holdings, Marie, she's the Vice President of Talent Acquisition. I heard her on TV a couple of weeks ago. They hire 8,500 graduates every year. What does Enterprise Holdings do? They own Enterprise Rent-A-Car. So they are hiring 8,500 college graduates to go out there. So I would say she probably has a pretty good handle on how these new entry-level employees function. And what she's saying here, we didn't change our training program, okay? But we do have to change how we communicate to our new employees. Again, we need to give them expectations, but we also need to inform them of the consequences and the rewards. What else can we do? Collaboration, right? Another way to retain them, recruit them, to grow them professionally, okay? You guys are natural collaborators. How do you collaborate? On the phone, okay? On the computer, okay? Here's the interesting thing for the older people in the room, or maybe if you check with your sons or daughters, you ever tried leaving a voicemail message on somebody's phone? How many people, when you do that, don't even have an outgoing message? How many of you got an outgoing message on your phone? Anybody? Okay, you're a little bit older, but no, very few people. So what we found is you really don't have time to talk, and that's okay, okay? We can sit here and bitch about it, or we can figure out how to work with it, okay? So we just got to figure out how to text faster, okay? Isn't that the case? Yeah. All right, so, but with Twitter, Uber, Facebook, all those things, friends on Woz. You know what Woz is? Anybody use Woz? Oh man, it is better than Google Maps. It's a free download. Use Woz, and it'll give you better travel directions to anywhere else you want to go. And here's the reason I put that up there is, this is another example of collaboration. On Woz, they'll even tell you where the cops are. Yeah. There are people out there that text in, and I don't know how to do it, but they'll text in, hey, saw a cop on 23rd and Vine. And then it pops up on your phone. You talk about collaboration, there it is right there. What are you going to do? It might slow down just a little bit. And then also to carry this just a little bit farther forward, the employer's got to be clear about the deadlines and any business boundaries. Okay? Well, you say, what's a business boundary? Well, 10, 20 years ago, it wasn't an issue at work because everybody knew there were certain rules and regulations that were just expected to be followed, okay? Perfect example, my brother-in-law who is retired from the legislature in the state of Colorado, you know what his biggest battle with the 48 employees that he managed? Whether they could wear flip-flops to work or not. Yeah. And they had meeting after meeting just to decide what part of the foot could show or all those things. We're not even talking about Jean Friday here, Blue Jean Friday. We're talking about just shoes, flip-flops, you know? Years ago, we didn't have to worry about that. Now, I'm being kind of silly and facetious about it, but those things we never have to worry about. But now they're here, okay? Obviously, we're not going to be wearing a flip-flops around in a food production facility, but just to give you a little example. So here's Generation X and Generation Y really can work together, okay? The guy on the left, Brent, went to work for Tennessee Bun Company. Well, he first went on an internship. They liked him. He was only there 3 months, okay? Did a good enough job. They hired him full time. About 6 months, and then they hired him full time. About 6 months into it, his immediate supervisor, Todd, Todd calls me. We actually use the phone occasionally. Called me and said, hey, he's just not working out. I said, what do you mean? You were so happy with him. We saw the results of the internship survey before, middle, and after. You were very happy with him at that point. Well, we just don't know what's going on. I said, does he have a mentor? Does he need one? Yeah, he needs one, obviously. The young man moved to Nashville, okay? Got married, bought a house, and got a dog. Oh yeah, then work came along too. He had to do that. All right, so we better figure out how to mentor him, okay? And so Todd takes him on as one of his understudies. And about 6 months later, I get a phone call. I said, you know, from Todd, okay, who's the QA manager at Tennessee Bun. And he said, wow, you wouldn't believe the difference in this employee. Brent really has made a tremendous turnaround. Do you have any more students I could hire? All right, but it all comes down to that face-to-face. We can't do it on a phone, but we can do it face-to-face and mentor and collaborate. Here's an interesting idea that Johnson & Johnson did. They actually have an affinity group. Get this. It started out as a brown bag lunch, but now it has kind of evolved into, I think they have beer after work. But basically, they're trying to bring millennials, baby boomers, Generation X people, Generation Y, the millennials, all together to try and hash this out. It's kind of like, you know, having like going to talk to your psychologist, except this is a bigger group. Right? I picked this up off the article that the lady was talking about on National Public Radio, that that had been very successful in trying to improve their retention rate. Another example here, we've got two young women who went to work for Kroger Bakeries in Columbus this summer. Well, I'm sorry, they did an internship. And young lady on the left there is from Chicago. The one on the right is from Michigan. And so they were kind of thrilled to get back here towards the upper Midwest. And they had a great experience. Why did they have a great experience? Well, I went and talked to them. A couple of things happened. This is what the company did. First of all, when they showed up, they actually had shirts for them. I know that's a novel idea, but I will tell you a funny story. I told you about Flowers Foods, okay? Probably the largest American held or US held owned, family owned baking organization in the country. About 3 or 4 years ago, the VP of manufacturing just came up and just read me the riot act. He said, why is my competition, and the competition would be Bimbo Bakeries, okay? They're based out of Mexico City. Why is my competition get 5 or 6 or 7 interns every summer and I get 1 or 2? And I show him a picture on my phone. He said, oh, the picture on my phone is kind of similar to this. The young man's name is Ben. His supervisor is right next to him. He was doing a summer internship for Flowers Foods in Miami, and he was wearing his uniform. It was a white t-shirt that one of the production line workers had written with a marker, Ben, another one had written Flowers Foods on here. Ah, you laugh, but some of you may have walked into something like that before. But again, from day one, if we're not prepared to succeed, I don't think they're going to stay with us. And also I should tell you, these two ladies, what's amazing is when I go out and I have the opportunity every summer to visit with some of them and see their year-end product reports or project reports. When I went there, the head of product development for Kroger was there along with 9 senior management people at the bakery. That's a lot of time to take away, about an hour long. But 10 people from Kroger, upper level management, decided they could come and listen to this presentation of these 2 young people. All right, so again, that collaboration, that mentoring, that coaching, that's how we're going to grow, take that 53 or 54% of the workforce and keep as many of them as possible in the food industry. A couple other things you could do, right? Again, we still want to recruit, we want to grow, we want to retain. So how are we going to do it? We could feature and celebrate employees' lives outside of work, you know? And some of the companies do this, some of our biggest stakeholders do this, where they have an employees page to show some of the great things that millennials or any employees or their families are doing outside of work to benefit. Why? Because the millennials want a work-life balance, okay? Wanted to develop an employee brand. What's the company's higher purpose? Is it strictly to make money? Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any problem with that. If we don't have a profit, it's hard to keep anybody working, right? But what's the company's higher purpose? What's the mission? Is it stated? Can we see it every day, every minute we're at work? If you're familiar with a company called Dave's Killer Breads, they're based out of the Northwest. They too are almost a cult following. Okay, fantastic bread product. They were just bought by Flowers Foods. And I only use that word cult because people are just, they gotta have a loaf of this bread, right? And what's interesting about this bread, it sells for about $5 or $6 in Costco or Sam's Club. It's now eventually, you'll start to see it here on the Midwest and the East Coast. But everywhere you go in there, whether it's the employee lunchroom, whether it's the production facility, whatever, there is all kinds of material on the walls to say, this is our mission statement, this is how we get there, and how can we help you join our team, stay on our team, and grow our team. And then the last one, pretty simple, just promote the social media skills. Well, we don't have to promote that much because y'all do it all the time, okay? But what you need to do is promote it amongst the older people, those baby boomers and Gen X people. All right, so here's a bunch of donut students. So these are some of my students. We had a yeasted donut lab last spring. And I show you that because only 22 of those are in the lab. The others came along for a free donut. I don't have any problem with that, okay? That's why we're in the business. People like to eat. Oh, the other thing you should know is whether we're in a paleo diet, gluten-free diet, whatever kind of diet it is, if you look at the baking publications, they will oftentimes will list what companies are adding as far as refurbishing, remodeling, adding on to their production facilities. And when you look at that, regardless of what kind of diet's going on, you know what companies are almost always adding to refurbishing, remodeling, and increasing in size? Sweet goods, high calorie things, okay? High calorie things. But anyhow, so they came along, and the reason I show this is really interesting because although there's only 22 that were in the lab, a couple others came in, and some of them ate donuts because they just wanted warm glazed donuts, and that's okay. But several of them came in, and they said, because in each lab we have a series of variations. In this particular lab, we changed the flour, we changed the fat content, we changed the frying time and temperature. And then after that is done, we also change the glaze. Some of the glaze will intentionally be thick and goopy. Some will go on too thin, right? But here is another, just an academic example of how we can do some collaboration. Bring in others, okay, to see what we're doing and to feel as though they're part of the team. Did they get to eat a donut out of the deal? Heck yeah, and that's fine. Now, you saw this guy earlier, his Ian. He was the guy sandwiched between two ladies on the production line, all right? Is our goal at Kansas State, or is our goal at any institution that's trying to produce food industry professionals, is it our goal for them to stand over a single vat donut fryer and fry donuts all day? If it is, it's the wrong goal, all right? Definitely the wrong goal. It's okay if Ian or others would want to do a retail operation and make cupcakes or donuts or whatever, all right? But probably not going to be challenged too much there. You'll probably get burnt out after a while, right? Now, this is probably one of the most talented students I've had, all right? We want to see him grow, so he goes and does an internship with Flowers Foods. This past summer, Flowers said, hey, that's a pretty good student. We might want to consider keeping him. Why don't we offer him another internship? So they sent him on another internship. This time he gets to be between Knoxville, Crossville, those are both in Tennessee, and then also in Lenexa, Kansas, right? So he got, remember I told you earlier, millennials like experiences, all right? So if possible, give them some additional experience to see what exactly the job offers. Here's a bunch of different generations working together, okay? The guy way here in the back is Ron Zell. Some of you may know him. He's with Corbion Ingredients, probably the guy that knows the greatest amount of functionality of ingredients I've ever met. Super guy. Ron's 67, 64 or 65, I think. Okay, so he's one of those baby boomer guys. Okay, we come all the way down here to Alex. Okay, she's a recent graduate, right? So Corbion has figured out a way to allow all of these different generational workers work together and grow their business. Right? Not that difficult. In fact, every year I usually send 1 or 2 more graduates over to Corbion. They're an ingredient company out of Kansas City, do a lot with emulsifiers. But again, just to show you, they can work together. Now, in some cases, some of our graduates or some of the entry-level workers into the food industry may be stuck on the production line initially. Okay? Well, that's not a bad thing, because now this young lady, for about 6 months, worked in a bread and bun plant. And just about 2 weeks ago, she called me up. She works for a large tortilla manufacturer in the state of Kansas. She said, hey, you won't believe this. And she graduated 6 years ago. She said, I just got promoted to senior production manager 2. You know? She was from a small little town in Kansas as well. All right? She put in her time on the production line. She was only there for about maybe a year and a half in different job capacities before she started to work her way up the ladder. All right? And now she's able to call back and say, look, I'm glad I stayed in the food industry. I'm glad I stayed in baking. I'm glad I stayed with this company, because we're making a lot of tortillas. Now I want to show you something. And we're just about done.
K-State Grain Science students are hardworking, show dedication and professionalism, and the fact that they actually care about you, and you can tell that they love what they do.
I feel very lucky to be able to have all the opportunities I've had in the years at K-State. The Grain Science Department has given me the skill set and knowledge to be able to give back to my local community as well as my country and hopefully the world someday.
I believe it's much more than just feeding the growing population of the world. In the Grain Science Department at K-State, there's always something new to learn.
Okay, so I know that was a shameless plug for K-State, but the reason I put it in there was quite simple. I've had 10 years of time to talk to young people, many of them your age, okay, that have had an education, have had a 4 or 5 year educational opportunity with us, and now many of them are in the food industry. And so for the millennials in the crowd, you have a fantastic opportunity in front of you. Now, the people who have the biggest challenge are not the millennials, it's the people who are going to hire and manage the millennials, right? So their challenge may be even bigger. And so what I would encourage, I didn't realize I'd have so many millennials in the room, but I would encourage the millennials, you have to collaborate with the old farts too, okay? That just is kind of a given, but it's a team effort, and that's how we're going to grow this food industry and keep continuing to grow it. And that's all I got for you. So thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? Oh, man. Didn't I give you some written questions to ask?
I'm lost.
Thank you very much for your time.